My name is Kevin. I'm a author and a poet.
I love that. And you have how many books published?
I have 2 books, but we're really going to only count the one. So I have 1 book published.
And you have a bestseller. How does it feel?
Unreal.
That's so amazing. Not many people can say or do that. What is your favorite poem in the book? And I know that's hard because it's a book of poems.
Honestly, actually, unequivocally, I feel like the intro.
The intro?
There's
First one.
I love that, yeah.
The first, it's a hidden poem, kind of.
Uh-huh.
Because when you're looking at the book, you see these pages and you just keep skipping until you get to the very first poem, or at least the very first poem that you think it is, which is Picking Sweetness from a Lemon Tree.
Oh, I love that.
But the actual first poem is the
before
preface.
That. Yep.
The preface is so raw, so beautiful. I wrote it after writing my book, and it's basically talking about, like, I just wrote this large body of art, and yet I still am in my head about everything.
Okay.
Like in the preface, let me read to you what it says.
Please do.
A quote.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so funny, because so many people messaged me after and they were like, what? They were like, you were tripping, but it's like, no, like this is
It went over their head.
exactly how I felt. And it goes, so this is toward the middle. I say, it feels so trivial to start with no weight in the introduction, nothing to bind the text with or to show honor to. I guess the better question would be, why do I not value myself enough to introduce myself here? Why do I feel as if I as a person am not important enough to be introduced, especially in my own writing? And I say, I guess that's something I will have to work on.
Damn.
And it's like, I wrote that, and that was the very last poem I wrote. This
Wow.
is months after I finished writing the whole book.
Wow.
And we were getting it published, and I was like, oh, I feel like I have one last thing to say.
I love that.
And that was what I said.
Okay. So now looking back, obviously, you published it, you love it. Do you feel like that was an essential piece of the introduction?
Absolutely. Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
I love it.
I look back and I'm like, it's funny because some of these poems, it feels like that these weren't me.
Okay.
Kind of like, oh, I've grown so much that I
Mhm.
look back at these poems and I'm like, dang, I was going through it. Like,
Right.
I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But then sometimes I look back and I'm like, I feel like I'm still going through that too.
Mhm.
So I think it's weird hearing people say they resonate with this book I wrote 2 years ago, because it's like, that's so awesome that you're resonating, but also I hope you get through this time.
Right.
Yeah, it's just it's a very humbling feeling.
I love that. What was the biggest challenges?
Writing poetry was never a hard thing for me. I think going back and having to reread is the hard part.
Okay.
Because you're having to, like, especially with my poetry, this book being a lot about trauma, kind of going back and rereading this trauma and reliving it as you're reading it was a very hard thing.
Okay.
And I have over 100 pages, so this
Right.
was like lots of micro
Rereading.
traumas I'm
Yeah.
having to reread,
Uh-huh.
all to perfect the book, to make sure it's good, and then being critiqued on how I phrased everything, right? The editing process, that was such a weird, nuanced experience where I'm having to explain to my editor what's the significance, the importance here, and her saying that's not conveyed. So I want you to go back, I want you to rewrite it, I want you to change this, I want you to edit that. And I'm like editing my words that I felt like are true to me.
Right.
Like it was just a really weird and difficult experience, but I think it definitely helped the tone of the book, and I love the final product.
I love that. And what would you say was your biggest inspiration in writing your poem book? What was the turning point where you were set, I'm writing a poem book and I'm releasing it?
Honestly, I can't remember a very specific time. I feel like, oddly enough, I was just writing poems to just write poems.
I love that.
And I didn't think they were honestly good. I thought they were just kind of like random loose leaf thoughts until one day someone was being nosy and I left my phone open and they looked at what I had just typed on my notes and they were like, "Oh my God, you write poetry?" And I was like, "What the?" But I was like, "Oh, I mean, I guess these are more so just thoughts." And they were like, "No, this is poetry. Like, this is so beautiful. You articulated your thoughts very well." And I was just like, I guess I write poetry then. I write stuff like this all the time. I started showing them a few other things and they were like, "Yeah, this is poetry. Like, whoa." And I was kind of like, am I a poet? Do I write poetry? And it kind of just got to a point where I wrote so much, I was like, I have to do something with this.
I love that.
And I was just like, oh, how about a book? Would I think that random thought would one day lead to a bestseller? No. But, you know, life. You kind of just go with the wind, go wherever it takes you, and you just keep flowing.
I love that. So, realistically, you did say one of the biggest challenges was having to go back and input how you feel and change it for the editor. So now, realistically, on a healing level, do you feel like going back and rereading, obviously during that time was probably more challenging for sure, but when you reread it, do those feelings come back to how you felt, or is it more like, man, I'm so thankful I'm not in that spot anymore?
I feel like a mix of both.
Okay.
There are times where I'll reread some poems where I'm not in that situation anymore, but I can still feel it as if I'm still in that situation.
Okay.
And I have to kind of like pull myself out of it and be like, wait, I'm not. I'm fine now. This isn't happening anymore. But then for that same reason, I'm like, oh, but I'm glad it's not happening anymore.
Amen.
I feel like what really healed me from a lot of this was honestly putting it out there.
I love that.
Kind of putting it out there. It's like I kept all of this in and I released it. You know, we have an uncle actually who also writes poetry and he also has a published book too. And me and him talked about it because both of our books kind of talk about family trauma and just trauma with relationships and friend trauma. So kind of just a big old trauma of the big three, right? Family, relationship, friends.
Right.
And afterward, me and him were sitting down, we were talking. He was like, "Are you writing another one?" I was like, "Yeah, of course. Are you?" He was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "It's hard, huh?" And he was like, "It is. I don't know what to talk about." I was like, "Right? We already got it all out. Like, what do we talk about? The sun's shining today?" Like,
right.
It's like, oh, wow, okay, now I don't know what to talk about. But I feel like because I realized that I don't have anything to talk about because I let it go.
I love that.
That it was like, oh, wow, like, I've reached a point of healing that I don't think I would have recognized if it wasn't for having a literal physical book to reflect on.
Nice. I love that. Okay, so obviously the people want to know, and you did mention a second book. Will you be releasing another one?
I will.
Hey, okay, we love it. We're here for it. Do we have a set date?
No. Everything's under wraps.
Oh, man. Okay. But you already have more poems written?
I have over 100 poems written for the next project. I have enough poems written to finish the book where it is. I'm not going to. I'm going to keep writing. I feel like the next book hasn't found its set tone yet.
I love that.
There's a lot of loose leaf poems that are beautiful and amazing but have no ties to anything else.
Okay.
And there's a lot of the poems feel like free standalone poems. A good, I would say 30% of poems are unfinished too. So they have just a beginning, or sometimes I'll think of an end first, which is rare, but it'll happen, and I'll think of the end and I'll write the end and be like, oh, I'll fill out the rest later.
Okay.
And I have to go back and reread a lot of those poems. But I kind of like this time. It's like some of those poems I wrote after writing the first book. Nice. Lavender is a Boy in Color. And I'll go and I'll look back and I'll be like, oh, I wrote this like a year and a half ago. And I'll kind of be like, oh, well, now this poem doesn't really serve me anymore. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really fit here.
Mm-hmm.
Let me change it, or I might just like completely erase it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's all a process right now.
Okay, so you did mention tone. Are we keeping the same feels of the first book?
I hope
of
not. That
Lavender's
was
Word
heavy.
Color? Okay. you know,
It
I
was
mean,
so heavy. Oh my god.
but I feel like that's the best part about expressing how you feel, because so many people are, I don't want to say afraid, but really are afraid to release their emotions, to be
Yeah.
vulnerable, to be emotional, if you will. And especially as a man, I feel like it's so important for men to express their feelings.
And you know, it's funny. My editor, when we were editing, she told me I played it too safe in everything.
Really?
She was like, "You played it too safe in all these poems.
Wow.
I feel like you can dive deeper." And felt like she was wrong. I was like, "No, I think it's going to resonate with people." Everyone who I talked to in person,
Mm-hmm.
they all loved the book. Everyone who I talked to who messaged me on Instagram, like I had sales from really everywhere. It was so random. I remember I remember I got an email that came through, and they were like, "Kevin, like, where did you promote the book?" And I was like, "On just general online." They were like, "Okay, because we just got like, not orders, but we're seeing the sales matrix, and we're seeing sales all from Europe, from South America, even all the way in Germany." And I was like, "Germany?
Mm-hmm.
That's really random. Like, I don't know anybody from Germany. Like, I don't know what to tell you about that." But so I hear all these great things, and then my critical acclaimed critic reviews came, and I get a bunch of 3 stars
Wow.
from so many critics,
Wow.
so many professional critics, and I'm like, what? Because everyone else is saying, we love it, all this,
Right.
and it's so funny. It kind of made me think about like singers, rappers, artists who their team is like, "Oh my god, this is the best music ever. You made it," and then it commercially flops, and everyone's like, "Oh, they fell off. This is terrible music." And it's like, what? My whole team loved it. Like, huh?
Right.
And I was kind of like, wait, okay, let me calm down. Let me read these reviews, and almost all of them were just saying the same thing. I played it too safe.
That's crazy.
And they were like, we feel that there's sorrow here, but we can't tell where the sorrow goes because it seems like you're just saying it in a very general sense, and we want to know what spearheaded it. If it was your cousin 3 doors down, we want to know that.
Okay.
But we don't.
Okay.
We knowing that somebody did it, but we don't know who that somebody is.
Got it.
We think if you added that heavy weight there, it would hold a lot better.
Okay.
And I thought that was so interesting. I was like, huh. Because, I try to not name people.
Right.
But seeing them say that was just like, I think you're giving other people grace with your emotions. They were like, no, you need to be even more real, even more raw, but just keep it concise.
Okay.
And try your best at for your next project. They were all saying they were excited to read the next one. I was like, oh, thank you. But they were like, for the next one, just dive deeper. And I was like, okay. So that's something I've been holding a lot of thoughts about when I write my poetry, being like, okay, did I dive deep enough?
Okay.
But also, like, I try not to overthink it too much because my editor will let me know if I
Okay.
did or not.
I love it. So realistically, do you feel like dive deeper as in, are we name dropping? Are we putting people on blast for the traumas they caused? Are we still being graceful about the situation?
I think because this book isn't really super trauma orientated, there's a few poems that may make the book that are not the happiest. I think the overall theme for this book is, again, still under wraps, but there's a mix of emotions. I think it's a little more balanced because Lavender is a Boring Color was very much more heavy. And I don't think it's going to be as heavy for this one.
Okay.
So I think for that reason, there's not really going to be an opportunity to name drop.
I love that. Okay, so I have to bring up one of my favorite poems. The poem is titled Time Machine, and I just want to recap the ending because I feel like the way your words capture the image. It says, time is not real. life is. So enjoy every second of it. And maybe, just maybe, you will feel her bliss. So I feel like in that poem, you discussed in the beginning, right? I hope, no, too wishful. I know, too confident. I feel like that is the biggest thing in life. People want you confident, but they don't want you arrogant. They want you to fail, but they don't want you to fail. And I feel like you capture that. And also in that section, the optimism started. And I feel like I love how you captured that, because it went from feeling traumas to, you know, the days are looking sunnier. It's looking to be on the brighter side. And I feel like time is something no one is guaranteed. And I love the way you captured that. What were your thoughts when writing that poem?
You know, I think at that time, I was still trying to convince myself
Okay.
that life was going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think at that time I was kind of writing, in a sense, like a very kind of that manifesto of the future being like, oh, I will be okay, everything will be fine. I started thinking to myself, what would I say to my past self?
Okay.
You know, but also what would I say to myself today? I want to think about, in the past I've struggled. Today I've struggled. I want to look toward a future where that struggle is no longer there. I didn't truly feel like it would come, and I actually wrote the entire poem off of that first line, I hope.
I love that.
And I erased the entire poem.
Wow.
But I kept I hope, and I crossed it out.
Wow.
And I put no, too wishful. But this was just a general note. This was not supposed to make in the poem. This was just a note.
Wow.
And I wrote another one saying I know. And I basically was like, I know it's going to work out. I know everything's going to be great. I know. And I erased it. I erased everything I wrote.
Wow.
And I crossed it out, and I put too confident.
That's crazy.
And I was like, I think, I guess, life works out, I think. And I went from there. And that's how the rest of the poem really goes. And you see, I kind of have that conflict with time, you know, the past, present, future. I say time is a weird concept filled with such life and wrapped with misfortune, wisdom, mayhem.
It's so true. It's so true. I love that. I agree. So now reflecting, you know, because you were in a different place, mindset, headset, physical being, you know. How do you feel reading that now?
I would look back and I'm like, wow, I was ahead of my time. I'm like, wow, I was so smart.
I love that. And then
it's so funny, actually. Sometimes I reread these poems and I don't think I would be able to rewrite these today. I don't think I would be able to write these same poems. Because these feelings were so raw and I was going through it so much that if I tried to replicate this, I would not be able to.
I love that. Look at the growth, you know, and I feel like that speaks levels. Okay, so I do have to conclude with the ending. Dear past me. And I feel like that's so relevant because of the growth.
You know what's so funny? I wrote that the same day I wrote the preface.
Wow.
So they were both the last part of the book.
Oh my goodness. I love that. So you waited. It was going to be blank
I
at
did.
first? Okay.
I waited. I had a different poem. I can't remember which one it is. That poem did make the book, but I can't remember which poem it is.
Okay.
But I had a different poem in mind for the back.
Oh.
The back of the book. I couldn't... When I was editing the book, I kind of just constantly had it off to the side. And I told myself, like, oh, it's okay. Like, this is going to be in the back of the book. It's going to be in the back of the book. But as I kept formulating the book, my editor asked me, there was 2 specific poems. My editor asked me, do you have anything to put here? Because I feel like these 2 poems need a glue to bridge them together. And I really wish I could remember what the poem was. But I remember thinking to myself, like, I do have one poem I haven't showed you. And I showed it to her, and she was like, perfect.
Wow.
And I told her, I was like, oh, but that was going to be the last that was gonna be the poem in the back of the book. Like, oh no, and she was like, calm down, it's okay, you are a poet.
Right.
Write another one.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I wrote that poem, Dear Past Me.
I love that. It's so beautiful. Do you want to read it to the people?
Sure. I'm like, oh no, it's my first time reading this one out loud. It says, Dear Past Me, I decided to give the world another chance to break me down, like the discarded orange pills on the ground. Too many blues entrap a world colorblind to the sage and dark lavender of the bruises in our lungs and the fracture of our minds. Did I make the right decision? For even the sap of the blackberries on the east is beautiful and bittersweet.
Man, those are powerful words. Like, holy moly, you said living in the future, and damn, I feel it.
And you know what's so funny too? I can say something I haven't told anyone before. There's a hint in this poem.
For the next?
For my next book.
I love that.
Because I started writing my book when I was editing this one. I thought to myself, like, what if I plant like a little secret? I was like, what if I plant a little secret? So there was a little secret that I planted in this one. And it's so funny because when I was reading it right now, I just remembered it. And I was reading it, I was like, oh, that's so funny. Like, But yeah, I planted a hint of the next book in this last one.
Aren't you glad
isn't that so funny? Like, isn't that so funny? It's like it ends.
Wow.
Yeah, it ends with a hint.
I love that.
To the future.
Period. Yay. To future me, I am proud. Right? I love
That'd be a
that.
nice way to open the book.
That's awesome. Okay. So, what do you want to say to anyone who is enduring challenges or trauma right now and is in their healing phases? What helped you get through it?
Honestly, writing down your thoughts.
Okay.
I think really visualizing your thoughts helps so much.
Okay.
It's a lot to keep it up here. It's so heavy to
Mm-hmm.
keep it in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're going through any level of just anything, if you're going through, you know, I've been having a stressful work environment. I'm depressed. I have anxiety. I'm having all these things. Like, you need to write these thoughts down.
Okay.
Write it down in a secure and safe place that really is only for your mind, only for your heart to heal from.
I love that.
And you need to reflect on it often. You don't have to keep going back and rereading your pages, but maybe every couple months just kind of look back and be like, am I still here? Am I still talking about the same old things day in, day out?
Right.
And then thinking about, what am I doing to change it?
Right.
If I've been talking about this for months, how do I change it?
I love that.
And I feel like for me, you know, I talk about like writing this book was my way of releasing a lot. Writing it and then giving it to the world. Letting the world rip it apart. Letting the world give it those 3-star reviews. Letting the world critique how I felt. That was therapeutic for me because I felt like now I'm not holding it in anymore.
Okay.
And I think sometimes people have to do the same. Even if it's creating art and destroying it, creating art and giving it away to someone. I know someone who, she's a painter, she's an artist in that sense. And she literally painted this beautiful painting. And she said it took her 7 months to paint it. Wow. And I was like, wow, that's a really long time. And it's so funny because some of her, she said, was also one of her toughest pieces and was her longest piece to paint. She sold it. She sold it for like $4,000. Great for her.
Wow.
She sold it and she was like, I feel like a weight just got lifted off my shoulder. And I told her, I was like, I imagine seven months, like, yeah, I'd be happy too. Someone took it off. And she said, well, I'm happy because that painting, that's how that I drew the painting off of the feeling of how I felt after the death of my dad.
Wow, how deep.
And I was like, oh wow. And she was like, all my feelings were on there. So for me to paint that, cry, you know, she she told me, she like showed me a picture and she was like, you see this red right here? She was like, that was red wine. I was so mad one day. I just literally threw a glass, a whole bottle at the painting, and this was when it was a blank canvas, and that's what made her start.
Wow, how beautiful.
And she said, and she was like, so to give it away, I feel like I'm able to move on.
Love that.
He's been gone for a year now. It's hard. I know it's going to continue to be hard, but I need to continue with my life, and I have not been able to. For a year, I've been stuck, and now I can keep going.
I love that.
And I was just like, and like right there, it's like I completely understand, but I think more people need to do something like that.
I love that. So creatively release.
You need to release it.
Period. I
Whether
love that.
it's giving it to somebody, burying it in the ground, giving it to flames in a dumpster fire, you need to
release.
You need to release it.
I love that. Okay. I thank you. I really appreciate your time. And to people who haven't read your book yet, Lavender is a Boring Color, what do you want to tell those people?
I hope you enjoy my book, Lavender is a Boring Color by Kevin Courtney Black. You know, look out for the next book. I think the poetry I'm writing right now is some of the best poetry I've ever wrote, but I will always love this book. I think no matter what level of poetry you are at, whether you've never read poetry in your life, whether you are an avid poetry reader, I think you will enjoy this book. I think you'll resonate with, if not the whole book, you'll resonate with definitely some of its loose leaf poems. But I hope that you enjoy this. I hope you love it. I hope you cherish it. And I hope you will continue to support me for the next one.
Yay, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much. This is our exclusive Inside with Kevin. Thank you for your time. And to one of you lucky listeners, you will be hopefully entered into the giveaway to receive your free copy signed by the author himself. So cheers to the new beginnings, cheers to the positive things to come, and cheers to many more releases.